Hi, I'm Tracy Smith. I'm the president of SwainSmith. Thanks for attending today's ISO 55000 webinar series. We're providing an overview of the standard. We're going to do a quick introduction on the standard and on SwainSmith. Then we're going to talk about its requirements, its benefits, the audit process, and then at the end, a summary. So, who is SwainSmith? We are a global asset management consulting firm. We help asset-intensive organizations design, implement, and continually improve ISO 55000 compliant management systems for their physical assets. We have been helping clients since 1997. We're passionate about helping organizations reduce cost while improving quality, safety, compliance, and asset uptime. We've helped some of the world's largest organizations with their most critical asset management issues and opportunities. Please let us know if we can help you. Okay, so we're going to do a quick introduction of ISO 55000. Who is ISO? ISO is the International Standards Organization. They develop and publish international standards. A standard is a document established by a consensus of subject matter experts and approved by a recognized body. ISO creates documents that provide requirements and specifications and guidance on the design, use, or performance of materials, products, processes, services, or persons. So today we're going to be talking a lot about processes. So why are standards important? Well, adhering to a standard helps to reduce risk by setting a required or a minimum agreed level of quality or attainment. Standards help you standardize. They ensure consistency. They provide also a benchmark to be able to measure your operation against, and they provide a foundation to build on. ISO 55000 is the international reference standard for the optimal management of physical assets. Published in response to industry demand for good practice standards, it was released in 2014 with the help of more than 50 public and private organizations across 27 countries and 15 sectors. ISO 55000 is the de facto worldwide standard for any organization seeking to demonstrate a high level of professionalism in the whole life management of its physical assets. The standard is actually made up of three standards. 55000 provides an overview, principles, and terminology. 55001 provides the requirement for an asset management system. And then 55002 provides the guidelines for implementing those requirements. The series of standards is applicable to any organization where physical assets are key or critical in helping the organization accomplish its goals. So if you're an asset-intensive organization, the standard is right for you. Meeting ISO 55000 requirements requires an organization to allows it to achieve its objectives through the effective and efficient management of its assets. Building your operation on globally accepted standards creates value, improves financial performance, quality, safety, compliance, and uptime, shortens the time to realize value, provides a foundation to build on, facilitates change management. Basically, adhering or building on top of a standard provides a great foundation for your asset management operation. So what is asset management? An asset is something with potential value to an organization and for which the organization has a responsibility. So the management of those assets across their entire life cycle is asset management. So managing those assets across design, construction, commissioning, operation, maintenance, repairing, modifying, replacement, and finally decommissioning, that whole process those activities associated with the care of those assets is asset management. So when we refer to assets, we're referring to structures and production and service plants, power, water, wastewater treatment facilities, distribution networks, pumps, motors, blowers, compressors, buildings, equipment. Physical assets. A key concept of ISO 55000 is the application of a management system to care for these assets, referred to as an asset management system. So what is an asset management system? Well, we're not talking about just software. We're talking about policies and practices and processes and technologies and software and KPIs, all the things that work together to help an asset management operation be successful. An asset management system provides governance and control. It's a documented approach used by organizations to bring control to their asset management activities. So if you want to think of an asset management system, don't think software. Think of software plus all the other things that come together to help that operation create value on a long-term and sustainable basis. Think of it as an SOP for asset management. So an asset management system uses policies and roles and responsibilities to standardize and coordinate activities. It's a documented approach. It's something you can point to. It ensures that everyone knows who does what and how things are done, and so that tasks are performed the same way across the organization. This creates efficiencies. An asset management system provides the consistent, deliberate practices that are needed to manage physical assets effectively and efficiently. Designing an asset management system is not labor or documentation intensive. There are industry-proven frameworks and standards and models available that can facilitate and expedite the development process. Starting with a proven approach provides a good foundation to build from. So we've talked about several different terms, and let's look at how they're related to each other. So when we're referring to your assets, these are just like we said earlier, these are your buildings and equipment and your boilers and compressors. And this is your asset portfolio, it's your asset registry. And those assets are taken care of by the practices and processes and technologies and softwares and KPIs that make up your management system. But there are certain things that the asset management system you put in can't control. And those are referred to as like attitudes and behaviors and individuals' commitment to making the system work. So those kind of elements reside outside of the system and ultimately lead into managing the organization as a whole. So asset management systems are there to provide governance and control of your asset portfolio, but you certainly are going to want to address commitment and organizational behaviors and attitudes, because they will have a direct impact on how successful your management system is in accomplishing your objectives. Okay, so let's talk about the requirements now. So what does ISO 55001 require? And its key requirement, its key mandate is for the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and improvement of a management system for asset management. This, like we said earlier, is referred to as an asset management system. So the key requirement of ISO 55001 is that you build, implement, and continually improve a management system for your assets. And organizations that desire alignment or certification to the standard must meet its requirements. So when you break down the requirements of ISO 55001, they come down to these 7 elements, and these 7 elements will also show up in the other management system standards as they are revised. So If you're working with an integrated management system approach, this is going to make it real easy to be able to move between one management system in place, whether it's quality or energy, to another management system, for example, on your physical assets. So let's start with context of the organization. So when you're looking at putting in a management system, you're going to want to be able to look at the external or internal issues that could affect the intended outcome of what you're wanting the system to accomplish. So you're putting in a management system to help you accomplish asset management objectives, and those objectives should be tied to what the organization wants to accomplish. So you want to look at, when you're putting the system in, what type of issues or internal, external that might come up within the company or outside of the company or organization that we need to consider. We need to understand the needs and expectations of everyone that's involved with the management system. And those are the ones that are impacted by it. Those could be customers, employees, it could be, and then they're the ones executing it, technicians, for example. And then you want to determine the scope of the system. What are the assets that's going to be responsible for managing? Okay, so the second element of ISO 55001 is leadership. And this ISO 55001 is a top-down approach. It starts at the top of the organization. Top management must demonstrate leadership and commitment with respect to putting the asset management system in. One of their key requirements is to establish an organizational asset management policy. You establish one for safety, or you might establish one for environmental. This one's established for your physical assets. Asset-intensive organizations rely on their equipment to be successful. And outside of your human assets, physical assets are next in line of importance. So starting with a formalized approach, like a management system, and starting with a policy helps to establish that mandate for how the organization's equipment will be managed. Top management shall also ensure that roles and responsibilities for the system are developed, assigned, and communicated within the organization. Planning. So when you're planning to put your management system in, one of the first things you're going to do is establish asset management objectives. So like we said earlier, you establish this policy. This policy is tied to your organizational strategic plan. Then you come off of your policy and establish your objectives. So asset management objectives should be SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, targetable. So for example, you could have objectives around reducing equipment failures, reducing cost, improving availability, reducing inventory levels, spare part inventory levels. So you establish these objectives. The management system is in business to help you accomplish those objectives. So establishing objectives up front, and then once the objectives are established, then you're going to build your plans for how you're going to accomplish your objectives. So if you've got an objective to improve equipment availability and uptime, then you might have a plan built around, okay, how we're going to build the preventative maintenance program for our critical assets. Building the plan is basically your game plan for how you're going to accomplish those objectives. So support, having the right support for the management system is critical, and the organizations determine, what are the resources needed to help put in the management system, and then to maintain it and to improve it. So you have resources, vendors, you have technicians that are heavily involved in the execution of this management system. So are they competent? What do we need to do to make them competent? We need to be able to retain documentation of that competence. And we need to be able to periodically review current and future competency needs. If you put in a new line or new equipment or a new building or a new building heating and control system, you need to make sure that the technicians and the vendors, whoever's servicing that equipment, are competent and to be able to do it. Ultimately, it will impact your assets, your asset management system. Persons doing work underneath the organization's control who have an impact on the achievement of the objectives, which would be technicians, for example, they need to be aware of the policy. They need to be aware of their role within the management system. They need to know what are the implications of not conforming to its requirements. The organization shall determine the need for internal and external communications as well on what it will communicate, when it will communicate, with whom and how. Communication, identifying resources, making sure those resources are competent, communicating over what the system's requirements and their role in it are critical for success. You'll also determine what the information requirements are to support your management system and the assets performing better and providing a higher rate of return. What is the information that you need? And this is where the software gets introduced. The software is an information system. It's designed to be an enabler of your management system. It's integrated with it. They work together. The management system is helping you with your practices and your processes and your policies and your business rules, and your information system is delivering the information that's resulting, that's interacting with it. So establishing the types of information that we're going to be getting out, for example, we might want to pull maintenance cost on all of our assets so that it could assist our capital planning efforts for next year. So that'd be an example of determining what are the types of information we need out of our system to help drive informed and educated business decisions. And you're going to be looking at software, you're going to be looking at data, you'll be looking at processes and methods for maintaining that data. Documentation is a key. If your process isn't documented, you don't have a process. It's important that documentation provides a reference. It provides something you can point to. So maintaining your practices and your processes and your policies and something that you can point to and share with. Documentation supports training efforts. It formalizes how you do business. Like we said earlier, documenting and building a management system is not a labor-intensive or resource-intensive effort. There are models and there's standards and there's frameworks available that will help jumpstart and expedite that process. So don't get scared away by the documentation. The standard sets minimums on what needs to be documented, but we do want to emphasize that, being able to point to how you do business, to be able to say this is our process, that's key. And you're putting this documentation in place for long term, for the sustainability of the operation. So it's well worth the effort. So you're also, when you go to operate the management system, and this includes the processes and the software, you're certainly going to be looking at implementing and controlling the processes that are in place. You'll be looking at any plan change that you make in a technology or in a process, in a business rule. You need to look at what's going to happen from this change. What are the risks that we're going to pick up? So, for example, putting in a management system could result in personnel leaving the company, not wanting to change, or retiring. So there's different things, and that could introduce some risk into asset management activities. Outsourcing, whether it's internal or external labor, that labor is treated. You have to be able to communicate. It's treated the same. You have to be able to. They've got to be competent. They've got to be trained. They have to know that the organization, any outsourced activities can affect the achievement objectives. So vendors, that are impacting, that are working on equipment, they're under the umbrella and they're under the direct control and governance of the management system. Performance evaluation. So you put in you design your practices and processes, you bring in software technologies, you move into your implementation mode. Now you need to be able to evaluate. How are we doing? You want to be able to measure it, manage it, to certainly to be able to improve it. So the organization shall determine what needs to be monitored and measured, and the methods for monitoring and measuring, and when that measurement will take place, and what are you going to do with the results? How are they going to be analyzed? How are they going to be evaluated? Performance evaluation, the results that you get back and the decisions that you make from it, you have to see it all the way through. So establishing KPIs, one of the key pieces right up front for this element. Internal audits, this is another way to evaluate performance. So after you've designed your processes, you can build audits around those processes. And once again, audit documentation from your frameworks and from models that are out there in the industry, they provide a real good jump start for putting in an auditing program. So conducting internal audits at planned intervals to help determine that the management system is being effectively implemented and maintained and that it's producing results. You're going to want a management review to be able to say, is the management system we're putting in, is it helping us accomplish our asset management objectives? And if it is, then we know that those asset management objectives that feed into what the organization's trying to do, that in the end, that's going to benefit all. Improvement. So you're measuring and you're monitoring, and then you're taking data back and you're evaluating that information. And when you notice a nonconformity, things aren't, reactive maintenance is still going up, for example, or equipment failures or downtime is up. These things require corrective action, and you have to be able to make that correction and then evaluate, review the effectiveness of the action that was taken. And then being able to say, okay, what can we do to keep this from happening again? And then on the preventative side, you want to be proactive, right? To be able to look at potential failures in asset performance or the system and evaluate the need for preventative action. PDM program is a perfect example. Ultimately, building your preventative action side, taking action on corrective issues or non-conformance areas leads into continual improvement. You have to be committed to excellence, right? So you have to be able to be focused on becoming better. And the key part of a management system is that it's a living system. It's going to continue to change, and the commitment to continual improvement is imperative. So if ISO 55001 is its key requirement is that you establish and maintain and improve a management system for your physical assets. So aligning to this requires evidence that you're meeting its requirements. So such evidence gathering is generally done by undertaking an audit. So the three types of audits, the first party audits are internal. Those are ones you do yourself. And second and third party audits are external. And usually doing these audits is the first step to figure out kind of where you stand in regards to the standards requirements. So what are some of the benefits of ISO 55000? Well, adopting this approach enables an organization to achieve its objectives through the effective and efficient management of its physical assets. So that's what it's helping you with. Once again, it's a top-down, comprehensive approach that's focused on effectiveness and efficiencies. The application of an asset management system, provides assurance that those objectives can be achieved consistently and sustainably over time. Being able to demonstrate that you've met the requirements stated in the standard, provides tangible evidence of a system, of a systematic, cross-functional, and optimized approach to asset management. Alignment provides assurance to customers, owners, and employees, regulators, and other stakeholders, that the assets are in good hands. Certainly, that's going to translate into enhanced customer satisfaction, optimized return on investment, improve risk management, safety, quality, uptime. Ultimately, what you're doing with the standard, with ISO 55000, is you're putting your assets up front, right in behind your human assets. And you're putting a lot more focus and attention on putting a system in place for their care. And that's kind of the key to aligning to that standard. It's actually the approach that the organization is adopting. So when you're looking at an audit, an ISO 55001 audit, that's your first step, like we said earlier. And real improvement consists of three things. You have to know where you stand, you have to know where you're going, and you have to have a plan to get there. So conducting an ISO 55001 audit is an improvement activity. It provides a clear picture of the current environment and how that environment measures up against ISO requirements, and then what areas need to be addressed in order to achieve alignment or certification. So you're basically coming in, you're doing a gap analysis to figure out where you stand, then you're putting a plan in place to close those gaps and get better. So once again, audit identifies gaps between current methods and requirements, helps you build a roadmap, enables the organization to identify improvement opportunities, benchmarking opportunities, supports alignment and certification, and demonstrates competent asset stewardship to stakeholders. So insurance regulators and other entities that are concerned about those assets, putting a management system in says that you are focused on their care, on their safety, on their quality, on their compliance. And that's, once again, that's good for all. So in summary, your physical assets exist to help the organization accomplish its objectives in its simplest manner. And that's critical. So effective control and governance of those assets by organizations is essentially to making that happen. A management system approach, an ISO compliant approach, provides the structure, methodology, and mechanism to helping asset intensive organizations deliver on their objectives. For sample ISO 55000 frameworks and models, or for more information on alignment and certification, please visit www.swainsmith.com or email Tracy Smith directly at tracy.smith@swainsmith.com. Thanks for attending the webinar.